Hello, welcome to this short video called The Irresistible Pull to Help, the Drama Triangle in Coaching and Supervision. My name is Julia Menaul from the Association of Coaching Supervisors. So, the Drama Triangle. Why the Drama Triangle? I recently wrote a blog connected to this because I was noticing that more and more coaches were coming to supervision talking about their motivation for becoming a coach. And it's a question I often ask in coaching: why did you become a coach? And the answers were often a variation on the theme, which were generally, I want to help people. So this made me wonder if there was something about the people or the work that was linked, and it led me to write a short ebook about the Drama Triangle for Bookboon. So in this session, I'm going to do a little bit of input on the Drama Triangle and then provide you with the opportunity to work on some questions and think about the implications for your own practice, whether as a coach or a supervisor. So as supervisors, you've probably already heard about the Drama Triangle, but here's a little bit of a refresher. The Drama Triangle is a model first developed by Karpman, and it's a model of social interaction, but dysfunctional social interaction. And it's a social game we learn growing up. And each point of the triangle represents a common and ineffective response to conflict, one that's actually more likely to prolong disharmony in an interaction than to end it. And Karpman described the various roles we tend to take up in interactions with others, and labelled them in these sort of three different roles, which have become quite famous now. So P for persecutor, V for victim, R for rescuer. The P can also stand for power, V for vulnerability, R for responsibility. I'll talk a little bit more about those later on. But the abuse of each of these, the abuse of power, vulnerability, responsibility, leads to the actual game or the dance between each of the protagonists. And it's important that as human beings, we can, all be all three of these at any different times, but we often have a default position, the ones that seem to draw us in the most. So my invitation to you is to see which ones resonate for you the most. So when we're in victim mode, we can feel very overwhelmed, helpless, hopeless, and as victims we can sometimes deny responsibility for the negative things that are happening around us, and deny that we have any power to change things. As victims, we tend to do less than half of what we could do. We won't necessarily make a stand. We tend to act a bit super sensitive. Victims tend to need kid glove treatment. We dance on eggshells with them sometimes. And a victim can really pretend to be impotent and incompetent, even when they're not. So the V can be about vulnerability, and it's about the victim not owning their vulnerability in an emotionally intelligent way, but using it to suck in rescuers. And then feeling let down by those rescuers, which means then in turn victims can often turn persecutor themselves, which sets up the dance that we'll talk about later on. Rescuers, on the other hand, are constantly applying short-term repairs to victims' problems while actually neglecting their own needs. They please others, they're always working really hard to help other people, but they tend to be slightly burnt out, harried, tired, physical complaints, they're doing too much without being asked. They can actually be a quiet martyr in the background about this, or they might be a loud martyr about it, and they can use guilt to get their own way. Something like, oh, look how hard I'm trying, it's all for you. And the persecutors, they blame victims for being weak and use guilt and shame. And the thing with the persecutor, though, is that actually they're feeling quite inadequate underneath. So they are abusing their power but feel powerless underneath. But they get to control using quite a bit of order, rigidity, a bit bullying in style sometimes. And when we talk about power, this could be resource power, personal power, expertise power, and often we're unaware of our own power in certain situations and can discount that. As persecutors, we might then criticise the behaviours of rescuers without actually providing any guidance, assistance ourselves. So, that isn't always helpful to actually have a go at the rescuers when you're actually not providing any solutions yourself. So the thing with the triangle is that you can see it in action between people, but you can also feel it at an emotional level as well. And what I find most interesting about the drama triangle is that we all unconsciously want to be the victim role, which most people, when I say that, react against, because most people go, no, I don't want to be a victim. But the victim role means that we can get our needs met without asking for those needs to be met directly. And for most of us, from very early on, from childhood, we've not actually learned how to ask for our needs to be met, because mainly we've been given messages from our parents, carers, teachers, that our needs are not important. So, one of the things that, you might hear your mother say is, want doesn't get. So it's victim that often we are working to be in terms of position. I would say whichever role you feel you don't do is probably the one that is going to get you and is going to trigger you. The other thing to notice about this slide as well is that there's no arrow between rescuer and persecutor. And that's because there isn't an interaction between rescuer and persecutor. The whole dynamic and the dance is with the victim, because remember, we're competing to be in the victim role. So the drama triangle you will see everywhere. It's one of these things that once you know about, you almost can't switch it off. So relationships, friendships, marriages, all those things there, and many fairy stories, when you start to look at them, are based on the drama triangle, from Cinderella to Star Wars. So the victim role is the key to the triangle, and the game revolves around the victim. And the victim can be an angry or pathetic martyr victim. Now, the drama of the drama triangle comes about because of the rotation of the roles. So people do not stay in the same role. There is a dynamic whereby the rapid role switching is the thing that causes conflict. So most of us will start as rescuers, but will end up as the victim. And the rapid role switching, very confusing to other people. And the rapid role switching tends to disrupt our attempts to think logically, and to express more authentic emotions, because the speed of it is too fast. So the faster the role changes, the more the drama escalates. and people's brains tend to short out. It's that game of talk fast, don't listen. And you often see that in soap operas where they're playing out a conflict. You see the speed of the interaction is too fast for most people. So that's a little bit about the triangle. How does it work? So it works by having the con and the hook, basically. So the victim starts the game with something like, can you help me? They are providing the hook. Now, my experience is the victim doesn't always directly say what they want. They might be asking for help in a more pitting, poor me type of way. I had a supervisee once who said, I bet your heart sinks when you know it's me in the diary. And it's like, oh, no, it's very tempting to go, no, of course not. You're great to work with, which is a classic victim and rescuer dynamic. So the hook starts with the victim saying, can you help me? The rescuer, of course, will say, of course I can help you, because that's the trigger for them. And then this interaction can keep going. So the victim might then be saying, oh, you're so helpful. I couldn't have done this without you. And then the rescuer's getting something from that. Oh, it's my pleasure. Let me know if you need any more help. So this can actually carry on forever. You know, all being well, these complementary transactions can keep going. And they're only complementary until somebody decides they're not happy with this. So they can look like honest social interactions, but they're not really, because there's other things happening underneath the surface. There's an ulterior concealed message. So what happens is that there's a switch. So one person usually gets unhappy and disenchanted and pulls the switch. And often it's the rescuer who is starting to feel a bit stressed from running around, doing more than their fair share of the work, taking all the responsibility, getting a bit frazzled. So in this example, the victim is overdoing the victim mode, and they're thinking, hang on a minute, this isn't working, I can't do this, I've already been terrible at maths, working with other people, coaching, all these sorts of things to hook the rescuer again. But what it does, it creates some, conflict for the rescuer, who then starts to think, oh no, they're feeling worse. I must be rubbish at this. I'm a rubbish coach, manager, supervisor. The switch happens. There's a drama dance then. There's a whizzing around the triangle. The victim has now become the persecutor. I can't do this. It's your fault. You're not the right coach, supervisor for me. I need somebody else. So they're not asking for what they need directly. They're actually becoming more of a victim by hooking the rescuer with the persecutor role. So the roles are swapped and the game is over. So the rescuers now become the victim because they're being persecuted. So the rescuer is now the victim. Oh, this is awful. I knew I'd never be able to coach, supervise this person. I'm not very good at this. I may as well give up. And that means the rescuer can now be the victim. And remember, we were all competing to be the victim role. So they're both now able to sort of retire, lick their wounds with that sort of old familiar feeling. So that's how the dance happens. You've seen the triangle and the main roles. So let's have a think about yourself and about how that might show up in your coaching and supervision work. We're all flawed, we're all human. I'm susceptible to these hooks as well. So thinking about these things are really, really useful, not just for your general happiness in life, but for how you might get hooked in your work with coaching clients, how you might get hooked in your work as a supervisor, and also how you may help some of your own clients with some of the conflicts that happen for them. So I have 3 questions for you to think about, and you may want to think about what are your defaults, bearing in mind what you've learned about the triangle, and how might you be more aware of the drama triangle and help your clients to notice it. So the first question is, where do you believe clients have played victim, and how? So that could be coaching clients, supervisees. What have they done that's made you think that might have been a victim hook to you? Where have clients used power play with you? Where have they perhaps abused their power and ended up being a little bit persecutory? And when have you done that with them? When have you abused your own power with them? And finally, the one that I think most coaches will recognise is, when have you perhaps rescued clients when they didn't ask to be rescued? And how might that have shown up in your work, and what happened as a result of that? So 3 questions to have a think about, and I do hope that they lead to some insights for your work. Enjoy. Thank you.